This is Maharashtra State Electricity Board before the reforms. So after independence, it was expected that the people can elect their representatives. The elected representatives form the government. So it is accountable to the elected representatives. Elected representatives are accountable to people at large. And this kind of entities, electricity boards, should be accountable to the government. And hence all the way accountable to people. And with this assumption, the control on these electricity boards and all public sector was very lax, very limited. At the same time, when there were private sector operating in power sector, like Tata's in Bombay and Goenka's in Kolkata, there was fairly high control of the government. But for MSCB, the control was very weak, presuming that this operation of accountability will continue. And we know it does not continue. See, rather than government, you read as minister. Minister can effectively appoint the chairman, remove the chairman at his will. Earlier, the minister could set tariff anytime. He could do it every alternate month, change the tariff. Investment decisions were only controlled by the minister. So minister had very strong control on all issues, investment, management, tariff. And all of it was usually one utility. In Karnataka, there were two. The transmission was separate, but that small part. So generation, transmission, and distribution. And this public sector actually served its purpose to quite an extent, by the way. Massive grid electrification happened. In last couple of decades, we see all the negative effects that we will talk about. But we should go back to history and see that what positive things the public sector has done. There were enormous positive things that did, what it was meant for. But the problems developed in terms of multiple crises developed. There were social, environmental, there were equity issues involved. We all know equity issues. If you see in electricity sector, if I break up households by how much units they consume per month, 100 units per month, 50 units per month, etc. So only this fraction consumes 100 units per month. This fraction consumes 50 to 100 units per month. And there is a large fraction consuming less than 50 units per month. And there is a fairly large section that does not have electricity. And this is a recent phenomenon. So despite 50 years of independence of electricity boards, we have this situation. So only 25 to 30% of houses in the country pay electricity bill which is more than 125 or 150 rupees per month. So when we are talking about the electricity sector, although we might see malls and factories and all that, but a very large population actually is a very small consumer. Anyway, so this were the equity issues, and there are many more equity issues. There were other crises also, such as technical and managerial performance crises. The plant performance were bad. Plant did not produce the sufficient degree it was expected. Transmission and distribution losses have been very high, at times 35, 40, 50%. So between generation end to the selling end, 50% of electricity was getting lost, and no one knew where it was going. Were it technical loss, or was it metering and billing loss? Very similar to urban model. You are familiar with that. In fact, we can draw many parallel analogies with this in terms of investment decisions and so on. That's why I am going into a little more details of this. But what happened was, out of these multiple crises, the focus came on financial crisis. See, naturally there are financial crisis. You don't know when 50% of electricity is going, the investment decisions are not being scrutinized properly, there will be financial crisis, no doubt. But all the discussion revolved around the financial crisis in mid-1990s. At that time, enrons were brought in, we had all kinds of issues. And to this financial crisis, the solution which was given, which World Bank came out in a big way of giving a solution, which said this financial crisis is rooted in political interference. And political interference was possible due to public ownership and the monopoly nature of the sector. So So this diagnosis naturally meant that prescription was reforms should be aimed at privatization and competition. So it should be unbundled, there should be privatization, there should be competition, there should be independent arm's length regulator. Earlier the sector was regulated implicitly by the government. Instead of that, there should be arm's length regulator, and there had need to be several policy changes. So this policy changes were following were to be implemented. Government ownership gives way to private ownership, budgetary support coming from the government budget. Instead of that, you get private capital. Instead of focus on self-reliance, you focus on global competitive bidding. Instead of cross-subsidy, farmers were charged very low tariff, nearly given free electricity, and industries were charged high tariff. So instead of this cross-subsidy, you have cost-based pricing. These were comprehensive, irreversible changes. This was implemented in Odisha, by and large. And Odisha was the first state which took World Bank loan, 95,000 million. 94, 95. How much was it? $1,000 million. It took that loan and implemented many of these schemes. It was very quickly, within just 4 years, it was replicated in all these states. World Bank loan was taken by all these states. All these states passed act to do whatever was required as per the World Bank wanted, because these states were in financial crisis and states desperately wanted money. But funny thing, at that time we were really concerned. What is this going on? States after states are simply adopting the World Bank model, signing on the dotted line. World Bank had conditions. For phase 1, I'll give you this much loan against these conditions. All those routine things which must be also happening in water. But ownership was not changed in most states. And 1998, Government of India found the regulatory commission is a very useful thing to adopt for very different reasons, not really for privatization. And our analysis, although the literature, many of the international literature talks about regulation as a way, as a mechanism to allow privatization. But in India, many of the bureaucrats had seen that there is large political interference, and they thought it was useful to get a regulatory commission in between, which will start to reduce the political interference. That's our interpretation of the story. Although there are also other factors, that many of the states have already gone ahead and put in regulator. So all these states have regulator by the time. So it was essential to bring in some uniformity among the states. That's also another driver for it. But so the 1998 Act was passed to enforce, allow regulatory commissions to be formed, but with the same format. 2003, Government of India adopted unbundling and partial competition model. Whatever earlier I showed, instead of that model, it became this model. So you have multiple generating companies, like you have Bescom for Bangalore and some other companies. This is the same structure which is coming in. And some generating plants which are regulated. But there are also some generating plants which entrepreneur can put up. Any private industry can put up. And large industries are allowed to have, take power directly from them. And then this becomes market. And this is not regulated. These prices are not regulated. Naturally, large industry will go there if the prices are lower than the regulated prices. Naturally. So this acts as market was designed to act as a safety wall. If the regulation is too bad, if you have enrons after enrons or Tanir Bhavis after Tanir Bhavis, then the cost will increase to a level which is too high, when the industry will just go up. And it was expected that that will act as a pressure on decision makers to not have excessively high tariff. Whether it works, the history will tell. But this is a structure India has of partial market and partial regulated thing. The regulated portion of the sector right now dominates. It is 95% regulated.